So, Rabbi Dov Lipman, member of Knesset, great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you.
Thank you, thank you. So, Rabbi Dov Lipman, before sharing what's specifically on your mind, please tell us what the Knesset has been doing since it was dissolved, if that's the right term, a short time ago. What does that actually mean for you on a day-to-day basis?
That is the right terminology, and it's actually frustrating for us. I was in the habit of waking up every morning and going to work and trying to make things better in the state of Israel, and all of a sudden that's all cut short, and there's really no parliamentary activity, and everybody goes out to the campaign trail and goes out to the public and tries to convince them to vote for them in the March 17 elections. And for us, that's bringing the long list of things that we've accomplished in the short year and 8 months that we've been in office, and showing people what's on the table in terms of the future. So it's a very different type of activity that I have become accustomed to. And therefore, in the Knesset itself, it's very limited. Here and there might be a special meeting that's called for transfers of funding and things along those lines. But otherwise, the building is relatively empty from Chavrei Knesset, and everyone is out in the field trying to be reelected.
Wow. So basically, for the next 2.5 months or so, there's no day-to-day business except for special meetings, etc., that you just mentioned.
Exactly, and in our case, it's even more exaggerated because the ministers that were in our party that were in the government are no longer in the government, and therefore we're not even involved in the regular ministry activity for the ministries that we had. And there's no doubt that that's frustrating because certainly the ministers were involved in doing many wonderful things, and at this point all of that's on hold. But we also look to the light at the end of the tunnel on March 18th, where hopefully we'll come back into office and be able to continue where we left off.
Wow, it's got to be kind of a very surreal existence that it's very, very different from, as you mentioned in the beginning, your day-to-day routine of going and making a difference for Eretz Yisrael, and now there's so many other kinds of things to do just to get yourself to March 17th.
It is, and I think to myself, just 2 years ago, we were involved in campaign and traveling around the country and doing this, and it's hard to believe that less than 2 years we're back doing it again. And for me personally, I enjoy doing. The talking part is a little bit more difficult, and I understand that it's part of the profession and it's part of what we have to do. I would just hope that there could be a few more years in between times that we have to go out and do this.
Right, and generally it's a 4-year kind of election?
It's officially a 4-year term. It almost never reaches the full 4 years. Usually somewhere towards the end of the 4 years during the last year at some point, the Prime Minister will call elections at the time that works best from his perspective to be able to keep going in whatever direction he was in. In this particular case, there were many other factors that were at work, and the Prime Minister called elections very early.
Wow. So, Rabbi Dov Lipman, member of Knesset, you got in touch with me last week. You asked to be on the show today. It's always a great honor to have you. What is so compelling for you to discuss? What is on your mind that you wanted to be on the Derech Eretz Show today?
I think that there are two levels to the issue which I want to talk about. One is on a voter level. We live in a world today where everyone is connected to everyone via the internet and Facebook and Twitter and email and the talkbacks and articles. And I've noticed that the level of the discussion is no longer limited to intellectual debate and dialogue. We know that according to our sages in the Talmud, the same way people's faces are different, people's opinions are going to be different, and it's a legitimate thing to have disagreement, and I think that's very healthy for us to have debate and dialogue and intellectual discussion, and people should even try to win people over to their side. That's certainly what we have to do as members of Knesset trying to be elected, but even amongst the voter population when there's discussions between people. And I think that we've lapsed into a point where the discussion is no longer on the facts or on an intellectual level, but it becomes very personal. people, and I certainly feel that's as a member of Knesset. People certainly attack on a very personal level, but even amongst voters and people within the same communities, we have in Israel, we have a right wing and we have a left wing and we have center, and we have people that believe in being more progressive religiously and more conservative, and all those are legitimate opinions, and we should debate them and discuss them, and that makes us a better people. But the moment you see someone is right wing and they see someone on the left, and now all of a sudden they're a bad person because they're on the left, or someone on the left sees somebody right wing and now they're a bad person, I think that we've totally lost our way, both in terms of Derech Eretz and in terms of healthy debate, which makes us better, and instead we make ourselves weaker. So I hope that people who are listening can understand you can support the people that you support, and you should argue your case as strongly as possible, but never let it get to a case, especially amongst the Jewish people, where now all of a sudden someone's an outcast in your mind and someone is invalid to express their opinion, and someone is a less Zionist or less Jewish because of their opinions. You have staunch Zionists and very strong Jews on all sides of the equation, and we have to always keep that in the forefront of our minds. So that's the first very important message.
Right. So before we go to the second part of your message, it sounds like with all the different wings we have, we're not really flying that well.
Exactly. And I think it's so destructive to us as a people when that happens. No one has ownership on the truth. No one has ownership over Judaism or Zionism. Everybody expresses it in different ways. And I think it's important for everybody to take a step back and recognize it, and recognize how critical it is that even though we go through an election campaign, that we remain unified as a people and never let it get to that personal level where now all of a sudden we're not divided in camps ideologically or politically, but we're divided in camps religiously or Zionistically. That's something which everyone should really do their best to work on themselves to not let that happen, and to certainly talk to others when they see it happening, to take a step back and say, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't go down that route.
Well, you're certainly singing the Derech Eretz theme song. There's no question about that. As you're ready to go into the second reason why you wanted to come on the show, I was hoping maybe at some point you can weave in a sense of how did we get to this point? How did we get to this point where what you describe is so prevalent? But we're happy to hear the second reason that you wanted to be on the Derech Eretz hour.
Well, that's actually a segue to the second point, and that is it's very possible the leaders are responsible for that. When leaders stand up and suggest that their way is the Zionistic way, or their way is what Judaism stands for, and everyone else out there has completely lost their way without talking about the facts. Meaning, just as an example, if someone is more on the right wing, and I'll use a very specific example, a person wants to say that we should never give up lands of Yehuda and Shomron and Judea and Samaria, that's an opinion, and you can express that opinion and argue that opinion as to why you think that's so. But to then go to the next level and suggest that people who feel that to preserve a stronger Israel, we may have to at some point evacuate some land, that those people are somehow selling out to the Jewish people. Those people are somehow not Zionistic. And that's something which then leads to people out there. They see their leaders talking that way, so now all of a sudden they can talk that way. So I think that the leaders really have to take responsibility here. Number one, for the level of discourse, to make sure that it not get to the point where we're somehow invalidating other people as Jews or as Zionists or as good people, but keep it to the level of the facts. That's number one. And number two, certainly to not be misleading and to present facts that are incorrect about other people. Derech Eretz is the way we speak, and I think it's also what we talk about, how we say it. And that's why I'm very proud to be going to the elections presenting very straightforward. I had a chut bayit last night in Yerushalayim, and I made my presentation. Here's what we've done over the last year and 8 months. Here's what's on the table that we want to continue doing. And there was nothing in that presentation in terms of canceling out everybody else. During the questions and answers, people asked, how do you differ from other parties and the like? But the presentation was, here's who we are. And even when it came to issues where we do try to differ from other people in terms of, for example, in our party, we're very proud of the lack of any level of corruption or connection to anything corrupt. And unfortunately, we live in a world where that exists. I try to focus on that part of it and let people recognize what we stand for, and not let it get to a level where somehow I'm now attacking everyone else on a personal level. Let's keep it to the issues. If I have issues where they've been not honest, or there's been corruption, we'll point it out. We'll point it out, and that's important for voters to know. But again, the main part of our presentation is the positive. It's who we are, what we stand for, and I hope that everyone else in the campaign will stick to that as well.
Member of Knesset Dov Lipman, you've certainly made a spectacular case for what we talk about here on the Derech Eretz Hour. Just last week, I heard the new chief rabbi, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Jerusalem, Rabbi Stern. He spoke at a rabbinic conference, and he reminded us that Rabbi Akiva, when studying the verse in the Torah which says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," you shall love your neighbor as yourself, Rabbi Akiva said, "Zeh klal gadol b'Torah." This is a huge principle in the Torah. And people always ask, in what way is that a huge principle? What does that mean, Zeh klal gadol, that it's a major principle? Each of us could find other major principles in the Torah. What makes this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself a klal gadol, a major or huge principle? And he answered that you are a gadol, you are a huge personality if you can accept and hear other ways of thinking. If you can accept your friend, if you can accept your neighbor and love your neighbor as yourself, and you can hear what they're saying. You may not agree, but at least you can hear it and you can accept it. You are a gadol. There is gadlut. There is greatness in that, in not just sticking to your own little corner of the world, but having your eyes and ears open to other opinions, to respecting them. And I think you personally really, really excel in that area.
Thank you so much. It's definitely a challenge to always keep your eye on the ball. Remember, that's the way we have to be. And I think I've mentioned this on your show before. Unfortunately, sometimes people, voters, they see what they see in front of the screens. And very often in the Knesset, that's people even yelling at each other at some point. And they don't realize that behind the scenes there are strong personal relationships between some of those members of Knesset who were just yelling at each other on the ideological front. And that's something that we can do a better job in bringing out to the population. I'll give you one example, a little bit of inside baseball for your listeners. So there's a video that came out a few weeks ago where a minister was dressed up in disguise and walking around Tel Aviv, and the message was that Israel shouldn't be apologizing. And the implication was that other parties and other ministers are apologizing too much for Israel, and we shouldn't be that way. A very popular video. I have no doubt that many of your listeners support that ideology and love the video as well. One of the people who might have been viewed, possibly, as one of the people on the other side of that video, meaning possibly being attacked, was the minister of our party, Yair Lapid. And Yair Lapid stood up at an event the other night in front of a few hundred people and was asked about the video. And he said he saw the video, he thought it was great, and he called up that other minister immediately and congratulated him for a fantastic video. And that's something which people don't realize. People don't realize that there's that level of being able to appreciate. Someone put out a great video, it made a point, and that's fantastic. What bothered me is actually then there's a follow-up video where Yair Lapid was made very clearly, tried to be portrayed as one of the people apologizing because he was asked a question and he took a few moments before he articulated his answer, and all you see is the moment where he's formulating his answer. And that was used to imply that somehow he's being very apologetic for Israel. And if you continue watching the clip, he then gives a very strong statement about Israel versus the Palestinians. I think we have to be very careful sometimes about what we portray, meaning those two leaders are close to each other, they're friends with each other, they pick up the phone and congratulate each other for a great gimmick or a great video. And that's something which is important for people to realize and not let it translate into terrible disputes between voters. The Gemara says, "Ein machloket bein Shammai veHillel, ela beit Shammai ubeit Hillel." That Shammai and Hillel themselves, they don't argue very much in the Talmud. There's I think a handful of examples where you have arguments between them. But between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, their students, it's en masse. Throughout the Talmud, we see that arguing. And I think that let's keep it to the ideological debates, but recognize that people can still be friends, still respect each other, focus on the truth, focus on keeping things as clean as possible, and then I think we can take an election campaign and instead of it becoming a Chilul Hashem, instead of it disgracing God's name, we can transform it into a Kiddush Hashem where we say there's a democratic process, we're proud of that, at the end people will make their decisions based on the facts and never reducing it to either a personal level or a dishonest level.
I don't know anybody in my audience who would disagree with that. You say it so well. I don't know how you feel, but sometimes I feel that being here in Israel, Eretz Yisrael, we're here in a Jewish state. I sometimes feel embarrassed that we kind of show this to the rest of the world, that the Jewish state is unable to get its Derech Eretz act together, especially, in high political levels. And I wonder if you would agree with me that we owe the world a model for decency and politeness and decorum when we get into the area of politics.
There's no doubt that the return of the Jewish people to Israel and the building of the state of Israel has given us a platform to be an Or LaGoyim, a light unto the nations in many ways. And we have, to a certain degree. There's no doubt that the fact that when there's any kind of a catastrophe around the world, Israel runs there to help out, or people even call on Israel to help. The fact that we are on the forefront of all kinds of technological advances and medical advances, that all certainly plays a role in being a light to the nations. But we have to take it to the next level, where in every realm, and especially leadership, we act with core Jewish values, and that's where respect and dignity and truth and a complete lack of corruption. We should be the model for the world of leaders who are there because our job is to serve the people and not to serve ourselves. And that's something which, for me, that's one of the reasons why I joined, certainly with the party that I'm affiliated with Yesh Atid, to be completely clean from any level of corruption and people who gave up other careers because they wanted to make a difference and really change Israel for the better. We can be, I believe we can be that light into the nations. We have a long way to go as we see scandals coming up all the time amongst various parties. But I do believe that it's possible if we raise that issue to the fore, meaning if the people of Israel, the voters say, we will not stand for this anymore. We're not going to vote people into office if they're associated with any kind of corruption or dishonesty or improper discourse. I believe that the people of Israel can make that happen. We as leaders for sure have to do that. But one of the things that can nudge leaders to do so is if that's something which people raise and say, we want to see a different level of discourse, a more respectful discussion in the political realm. And there's no doubt that at that point the world can see the way we act and the way our leaders act. And listen, the world is watching us. Any little story that happens in Israel is broadcast all over the world and on the headlines of every newspaper. So let's transform those into the most positive headlines they can be instead of, God forbid, the negative.
You're absolutely right. I have just one more. We have maybe about a minute and a half. Besides the world looking at us, I'm also concerned that sometimes this lack of civility in campaigns and from the higher echelons in our government, I often am concerned that it affects our children. And I'm wondering if you feel that they are paying attention to all of this. Do you think this is something they're listening to?
I can tell you that my children go to schools and that they're very quiet about the fact that I'm in politics and it's not talked about, but they hear discussions. And, the minister, the chairman of my party, Yair Lapid, from young children has been called names that no Jewish children or Jews in general should be calling fellow Jews. And what they don't understand is how much Yair Lapid himself would respect them and would never talk about them or their parents or their political party in that way. And that means that children are listening. Children hear at the Shabbat table how people are talking about people in our government and the name calling and, again, the invalidating people for their political views. They are listening, and it's making a huge difference in terms of where our children are. And then what's the big jump from there to them talking about their friends that way or talking about their teachers that way or talking about their rabbis that way? And we have to realize that it infiltrates every single area of life. And parents should go out of their way to make sure that they keep all political discussions to the up and up, to the debate about the ideology, and never about the person or the personality, because our children are listening, and it absolutely influences them in the most negative of ways.
Wow. Dov Lipman, you've said so much today that we can really think about and frankly agree with. We wish you well in the upcoming elections. I personally hope you get back into the Knesset or stay there. and continue doing your fine, outstanding work. Those of us in Ma'ale Adumim look forward to your being here with us in a couple of weeks. Member of Knesset Rabbi Dov Lipman, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us.
Thank you so much. It was an honor being here. I look forward to being my lad as well.